Hello and welcome back to our Save a Seat series here on Patreon. As always, I'm your podcast host, Chloe, and I am joined by Amanda and Oseye of Mirror Indy to dig deeper on today's episode. So if you did not listen to our Spotify episode, we are talking about women in the media. Mirror Indy is a nonprofit news organization based out of Indianapolis that is working to tell the truth and get stories out there that may not always be represented. So I'm very happy to be joined again by Oseye and Amanda. Welcome back, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you for having us back.
I'm so glad to be talking to you today. And before we started rolling on this episode, we were launching around some ideas. And Amanda, I would love to give you the floor briefly to talk about, you had mentioned a fundraiser coming up and how you mentioned in the Spotify episode that you were the co-founder of Indie Maven, and they have been one of our partners since the beginning of the podcast, just in talking to women. A lot of the women that we talk to are involved in Indie Maven in some capacity, and it's been a wonderful resource for us. So tell me a little bit more about what's coming up for you.
Yeah, so several months ago, I went to Maven Space as a representative of Mirror Indy, met with Leslie Bailey, who is the CEO of Indie Maven, and Tamara Winfrey Harris from the Women's Fund was there. And we were just sitting there going, well, what could we do to support a reporter who covers women's well-being and health full time? Well, I don't know how many months, that was maybe 6-7 months ago. Well, we have a fundraiser at the end of this month, March 31st at Maven Space, to hire a full-time reporter who would cover those issues statewide. And there's a whole coalition of women behind this effort right now. So it's really exciting to think that this could actually happen when it was just something we thought, hey, it may happen. So that's one of the biggest things I think we're doing right now to support women.
Yeah, that I'm smiling because I just see so much potential here and so many issues that need coverage. We talk about maternal mortality, infant mortality, access to women's reproductive health care. Like there's so many things that this position is just so needed. It's so very needed. And it's just like, of course, Amanda will be one of the people talking about what could we do. Yeah. Amanda, like it's the whole, the trio, of course. Leslie and Tamara, of course.
But hey, Oseye cared about it enough to help us get it across the finish line. So thank you.
Did I really do anything?
You did. You were like, heck yes. I have the email. Yeah.
And that's what it's all about, just knowing who you have in your back pocket to say, how can we get this done? How can we make it happen instead of just having an idea about a cool thing you can do?
Yeah.
And it sounds like having one person devoted to that. I mean, like you said, Oseye, there are so many different areas that this person could cover, and having full-time dedication to those things is only going to make coverage more inclusive.
Yeah, it is.
And it's going to help us understand what women in rural communities are facing too, not just urban areas. So that will be interesting to see what comes out of that.
Yeah, I mean, talk about underrepresented groups.
And see how much like the same.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The similarities.
Yes. So many similarities.
Yep. Yeah. And on that note, Oseye, with all of these issues that could be covered around women and their rights and everything that you do at Mirror Indy, what are some things that you've done recently that you feel like uplift those voices or, showcase women at Mirror Indy?
Well, I think one of the things that we really try to do, and we try to be very intentional about this, is how we cover women, how we cover people in general, but how we cover women, how we cover Black people, how we cover like we try to make sure when we're covering people that we actually have some empathy, that we try to make someone's voice be equitable, that it's not always just centering the same people who's always been centered, white men. Mm-hmm. We try to be very intentional about centering other voices, and in particular women's voices. Not just in the story. I'm laughing because I'm just thinking about how in the newsroom it used to be like the women's beat was like all feature stuff.
Oh my, don't even get me started.
Because I knew that you were going to. I knew it was going to grind your gears.
Still, Yeah, have a hangover from those days.
It was always like recipes and cooking and, and how we're
Advice
evolving.
columns.
Yes. And we're evolving to women's issues being like meaty issues and meaty storytelling. So I think that's how we also think about covering women. And I'll let Amanda talk about how we hire women artists, non-gender conforming artists. Like we try to make sure we elevate their work. And then she could talk a little bit about Green Lawn and like how that exhibit came to be, because that was a woman artist, a Black woman artist who created that. So I'll let Amanda, because Amanda just gets so passionate about the art side of things that I just like to see her go.
Well, I do, and we have a nice, generous freelance budget, I should say, at Mirror Indy, but that helps us hire artists in the community to help us tell our stories. Like we don't just like send them the story and say illustrate it. In many cases, they're helping us build and tell the story, right? And then we do that with writers, visual artists, dancers. Last year, we commissioned an original song from a band that had, I think, 3 of the 4 were women in it, to celebrate spring. So we're always doing something that brings in artists to help us tell our stories. And Green Lawn Cemetery. So I'm excited about this one because it was based on reporting by Emily Hopkins, who is our data reporter at Mirror Indy. And they spent months covering what was happening at the site of Green Lawn Cemetery. Are you familiar with it by chance, Chloe, the history?
I'm not.
Okay, it was the cemetery, I think they maybe in the mid 1800s, right? And it was where some of the city's earliest Black residents were buried. And over the years, development has come in and just built right over the site without caring about the integrity or the dignity of the remains there. Some of the bodies have been washed away by floods into the White River. Others, cadavers were sold to medical students, right? So it's been a disaster. And Emily has been talking to community advocates in the city about what they're doing to tell the history of the cemetery before it is buried by land developers. So we took that concept and we were thinking the audiences who are affected by this the most are probably the audiences that aren't coming to traditional media outlets for information. So we worked with an artist and our own team and built it into a traveling exhibition. So it had its like with art, right? So it's like you might see it in a museum. Okay, it's not as good as what you might see at like a major museum, but we did our best. It was our first try and we're so proud of it. And it debuted at Gainbridge Fieldhouse last week. So 4 days there, right? So who knows how many thousands of people it reached. And because of that, now we have churches and schools and other places asking us to take it there. So that's just something we're really proud of from an innovation standpoint. And yeah, just getting artists involved in the process too, to show